Welcome to the research desk.
We are so glad to be diving into this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So to set the stage here, we live in an age characterized by, well, a relentless, overwhelming flood of synthetic images. They're cheap, they're abundant, and they are instantly legible.
Instantly. I mean, you pull a device from your pocket, and within milliseconds, you can conjure up a photorealistic rendering of a landscape that never existed.
Right, or a historical event that never even occurred. Or, a flawless portrait of a person who has never actually drawn breath.
We're practically suffocating in representation. Images have become, arguably, the absolute cheapest commodity of the modern era.
They really have. They're frictionlessly produced, instantly categorized by the brain, and then just immediately discarded.
Which brings us to a critical, unavoidable question.
Which is? Well, in a world where seeing and recognizing have been perfectly automated by machines, why does abstract art that stubbornly insists seeing is absolutely not the same as recognizing, why does it still matter?
That is the core of it, really.
It is! The stakes here are vastly larger than just subjective aesthetic taste. We are standing right at the fault line between human perception and mechanical interpretation.
We're navigating that space between private, unarticulated feeling and public, institutionalized culture.
Exactly. And I am going to make the case today that abstraction is the most profound visual language we possess. It is a deeply universal language of perception.
Okay, I see what you're going with this. Okay.
It maps sensation, relation, and action. It is, essentially, the architectural blueprint of how it actually feels to be a conscious human being navigating a highly complex universe.
Well, I look at that exact same landscape of abstraction and I see something entirely different. I see a mythology that desperately needs to be stress-tested.
A mythology?
Yes, a mythology. The idea that abstract art operates as some pure universal language of perception is, well, it's a beautifully comforting fiction. It's a narrative we have told ourselves to elevate a very specific historical moment.
You don't think it transcends that?
Oh, not at all. It elevates a very specific set of cultural values. My position is that abstraction does not possess an inherent magical universality that transcends time and space.
Interesting. So what does it do?
Instead, it merely borrows its meaning from the context surrounding it. It relies heavily on the historical scaffolding that props it up, the learned conventions we are quietly taught to accept, and, perhaps most importantly, the massive institutional power that validates it.
I mean, I definitely want to dig into that institutional power aspect.
Oh, we will. We are going to examine the historical evidence today, and that evidence is going to systematically shatter the assumption that abstract art is a pure, unmediated escape from the constraints of reality.
I'm ready for the stress test.
Good, because when you strip away the mid-century romanticism, you find that a splash of color, a geometric form, or a physical gesture, they do not arrive in the human mind as pure, context-free transmissions of universal truth.
You're saying they're loaded.
Heavily loaded. They arrive weighed down by cultural baggage, geopolitical utility, and economic strategy. To truly understand where meaning and abstract art actually lives, we can't just stare at the canvas. We have to look outside the frame.
All right, well, to begin this inquiry, we really have to solve the definition problem first. Because the very word abstraction has been fundamentally misrepresented.
Oh, for sure. It's usually defined by what it isn't.
Exactly. For over a century, the public has been told that abstract art is defined entirely by absence. We're taught to look for the total absence of representation, the removal of recognizable objects, the deliberate elimination of a narrative.
But framing something by what it lacks isn't a definition. It's just a void.
Precisely. The strongest, most accurate account does not define abstraction as a clean, rigid binary between what is real and what is abstract. Rather, it operates on a continuum.
A continuum of emphasis.
Right. Abstraction is the relative prioritization of visual relations over direct, literal depiction. It elevates color, form, rhythm, texture, spatial tension, and material presence to the primary subjects of the work.
So it can still have hints of reality.
Absolutely. A painting can still possess the faint whisper of a landscape or the vague structural architecture of a human body, while operating entirely abstractly. The boundary is an emphasis, not a strict rule of physics.
That makes sense.
To understand how radical this shift in emphasis truly was, we have to look at the dawn of the modern story and the work of Vasily Kandinsky.
Ah, Kandinsky, the classic starting point.
He really is. But Kandinsky's historical force wasn't simply that he woke up one day and stopped painting recognizable houses, trees, and horses. His genius was that he stopped treating painting like a transparent window into the physical world and began treating it exactly like music.
The musical analogy is powerful.
It is. Consider the mechanics of how we experience sound. When you sit in a concert hall and listen to a symphony, you don't pause the performance to ask the conductor what physical object a C minor chord is meant to depict.
Right. You don't ask, is that chord a tree?
Exactly. You don't demand that a sudden crescendo look like a thunderstorm or that a bass line perfectly imitate the shape of a mountain. The music operates directly on your inner life.
It bypasses the analytical filter.
Completely. It entirely bypasses the analytical, labeling function of the brain, the part that constantly asks, "What is that?" and strikes directly at the nervous system. Kandinsky believed color and form could act with that exact same unmediated physical power.
So, a blue next to a yellow?
Yes, a specific shade of blue placed next to a vibrant yellow creates a visual vibration. It creates a dissonance or a harmony. He created a completely new proposition for the visual arts. Painting need not imitate the world to say something undeniably true about human experience.
It communicates through internal relations.
Exactly. It could communicate entirely through its own internal relations.
Well, that narrative of Kandinsky and the pursuit of pure, universal artistic feeling is seductive, I'll give you that. But it requires us to completely ignore the mechanics of human psychology.
How so?
We have to look at how the brain actually processes visual information. Think about the architecture of a dream, or, the shifting dreamscapes in a film like Inception.
Okay, I love that movie.
Right? When you are inside the dream, the folding architecture, the sudden impossible changes in gravity, the bizarre transitions from a hallway to a coastline, they all feel entirely fluid.
They feel perfectly logical in the moment.
Exactly. They feel deeply meaningful in the moment, but they only feel that way because your mind is actively, desperately applying hidden, learned rules to hold the illusion together. Your brain is generating the logic on the fly.
And you're saying abstraction works the same way?
Abstraction operates precisely the same way. It feels pure and unmediated to the observer only because the observer brings a vast, completely invisible library of learned conventions to the canvas.
I see.
To claim that geometry or color is a universal transmission is to ignore how human perception actually functions. This brings us directly to the work of art historian and psychologist Ernst Gombrich.
Gombrich revolutionized this stuff.
He really did. He changed our understanding of perception by demonstrating that viewers never, ever passively receive an image. The human eye does not function like a mechanical camera lens, simply opening its shutter and letting light in to be recorded objectively onto a blank slate.
Right, the eye isn't passive.
The eye actively searches. The body physically responds. The mind actively constructs reality based on deeply ingrained, learned schemas.
Okay, but let's look at a concrete example.
Let's do it. When you stand in front of Kazimir Malevich's Black Square from 1915, a painting that stripped away absolutely everything, reducing the canvas to a dark geometric shape on a lighter field, your brain does not just rest in a state of pure spiritual reception.
No, it's definitely working.
Your brain is frantically working to categorize what it is seeing. It is drawing on a lifetime of looking at shapes, borders, contrast, and spatial depth. The abstract canvas does not abolish meaning. It forces the mind to construct meaning without its usual literal subject matter.
I would argue that's a feature, not a bug.
Sure, you are forced to attend more intensely to the contrast, the density of the black paint, the slight irregularities of the painted edge. But the critical flaw in the universalist argument is this. The schemas your mind uses to construct that meaning are not universal biological constants.
You think they're purely learned.
Those learned schemas are distinctly cultural and geopolitical constructs. You are reading the painting using the specific visual grammar you were raised in.
Well, I understand the instinct to emphasize the viewer's cultural background, but I think you're leaning so far into the subjective experience of the viewer that you are completely erasing the objective, physical reality of the artwork itself.
Erasing the physical reality?
Yes, you're suggesting that a painting is nothing more than a mirror reflecting the viewer's learned biases, but the visual relations established by Malevich in Black Square are not arbitrary cultural suggestions.
They aren't?
No. When Malevich painted that canvas in 1915, he didn't just paint an empty picture. He turned the painting into an arena of profound physical tension. He created a specific visual frequency.
Okay, but frequency is interpreted.
But the content of the painting was no longer a person or a place. The content became the tension between the figure and the ground, the strictness of the edge versus the expansiveness of the field.
This physical presence.
Exactly. The profound, unyielding flatness of the paint against the undeniable physical presence of the canvas in the room. Suprematism, the movement Malevich founded, declared that pure artistic feeling could be carried by these fundamental relations.
But pure artistic feeling is a very bold claim.
You do not need a cultural dictionary to feel the psychological weight of a massive, heavy, dark square pressing against a light border. The contrast itself creates a physiological response in the optic nerve.
A physiological response, sure.
It demands that you confront the absolute weight of existence without offering you a narrative to distract yourself with. Malevich proved that you do not need to paint a literal tragedy, a shipwreck, a battlefield, a weeping figure, to make the viewer feel the physical sensation of dread, finality, or absolute stillness. The form itself does the work.
The form only does the work because you have been trained to let it. Let's pull back the curtain on this myth of pure context-free meaning.
Go ahead.
The fundamental flaw in your argument is the assumption that colors, forms, and physical tensions arrive in the human minds cleanly, stripped of historical baggage. They absolutely do not.
They don't arrive cleanly?
No. Every single element of abstraction is deeply, heavily loaded. Consider the simplest element, color.
Okay, color.
A vast, unbroken field of blue might suggest the infinite divinity of the heavens or profound spiritual peace in one cultural setting. But that exact same shade of blue signifies profound melancholy, grief, and sadness in another.
Context matters, sure.
In yet another culture, it represents stark, unforgiving coldness and isolation. Red is even more volatile.
Red is definitely volatile?
What happens when an artist slashes a chaotic streak of red across a canvas? Does it signify romantic passion and desire? Does it scream danger, violence, and spilled blood? Is it a deliberate call for political revolution, or does it represent prosperity, luck, and joyous celebration?
It depends on the viewer.
The answer depends entirely on the viewer's cultural training and geographic location. The grand claims for a universal language of abstraction completely collapse the very moment they are subjected to rigorous cross-cultural scrutiny.
I think you're overstating the cultural barrier.
And this cultural coding is not merely accidental. It's not just a matter of different traditions evolving organically. This coding has been deliberately, strategically weaponized by powerful institutions.
Weaponized?
We have to examine the stark institutional reality of mid-century abstraction. During the Cold War, the explosion of abstract expressionism in the United States was not merely a formal triumph of brilliant, brooding artists in New York discovering a new visual vocabulary.
It was a massive cultural shift.
It was a highly calculated geopolitical strategy. The United States government, operating subtly through organizations inextricably linked to the Congress for Cultural Freedom, actively promoted, funded, and toured massive exhibitions of American abstract art around the globe.
Okay, the CIA's involvement in touring art is historically documented, but
Why would the government care about splattered paint? Because these massive, chaotic, completely unstructured canvases were intentionally framed as the ultimate symbol of individual liberty, freedom of expression, and capitalist dynamism.
a contrast to the Soviets.
They were deployed as a direct ideological weapon against Soviet socialist realism. The Soviet Union mandated art that was rigid, highly structured, and deeply representational. Paintings of strong, happy workers, industrial progress, and clear, literal narratives.
Right.
So what actually happened here? Think about this for a second. The word abstract ceased to be merely an art historical descriptor for non-representational painting. It became a geopolitical brand.
A brand? That's a bit cynical.
The category's prestige, its massive market valuation, and its critical aura of genius were manufactured by institutions with strategic global interest. The definition of what it meant to be a great modern artist was not neutral. It was weaponized to serve the interests of the state.
Okay, hold on.
When we stand in a museum today, look at those massive canvases, and feel a sense of profound, liberating freedom, we are not experiencing a pure transmission of universal form. We are experiencing the lingering, deeply internalized success of a mid-century propaganda campaign.
Wow, okay. I hear the historical reality of the Congress for Cultural Freedom. I really do. But I have a genuinely hard time buying that conclusion.
Really? Why?
Because you are attempting to reduce the entirety of aesthetic physical experience to a cynical exercise in Cold War geopolitics. Yes, institutions utilize art. Yes, governments co-opt culture for propaganda.
It's historically proven.
Yes, context inevitably shapes historical reception, but to suggest that the profound, visceral, bodily impact of an abstract canvas is nothing more than a successful PR brand, that completely ignores the physical reality of the object and the biological reality of the human body standing in front of it.
I'm not ignoring the object, I'm explaining its reception.
You are ignoring the ingredients. Think about a magnificent meal prepared by a master chef. Your argument is akin to saying that you can define the quality, the taste, and the nutritional value of that dish entirely by studying the culture of the dining room.
That's a fun analogy.
Or studying the history of the restaurant's financial backers and the geopolitical origins of the recipes. Certainly the culture of the table matters. The lighting matters. The prestige of the restaurant influences your expectation.
Obviously.
But the chef's actual physical skill in the kitchen, the precise application of heat to protein, and the chemical reality of the ingredients still fundamentally dictate the experience on your palate.
But the palate is trained.
You cannot eat an institution. You cannot physically taste a political narrative. The physical ingredients act upon your senses regardless of the propaganda surrounding them.
Okay, so let's talk about those physical ingredients.
Let's do it. To prove that the physical ingredients and the explicit actions of the artist matter fundamentally, we must shift our focus away from the institutional framing and look closely at the actual physical creation of the canvas.
Like Pollock?
Exactly like Pollock. The post-war American abstractionists didn't just invent a new visual style to hang on a wall, they fundamentally redefined what a painting was by turning the canvas itself into an arena of action.
The canvas as an arena.
Consider the specific reality of Jackson Pollock in the year 1950. He is standing above a massive swath of raw, unprimed canvas unrolled directly on the floor of his freezing barn in Springs, New York.
It's an iconic image.
He is creating the masterwork Autumn Rhythm, number 30. He is not standing politely at a wooden easel, holding a delicate palette, applying oil paint with a small brush to mimic the exact curve of a landscape.
No, he's basically inside the painting.
He has stepped over the edge of the canvas. He is moving around it and literally stepping into it. He is pouring, dripping, and flinging commercial, industrial enamel paint in continuous, sweeping rhythmic motions. He is using sticks, trowels, and hardened brushes.
It's a very physical process.
Now, think about what this does to visual perception. For centuries, European painting relied on a basic rule of gravity. There's a figure, and there's a ground. There's a foreground and a background.
The eye knows exactly what to focus on.
The eye knows exactly what to focus on and what to ignore. Pollock completely detonates that relationship. The painting absolutely refuses conventional figure-ground stability. There's no horizon line to orient yourself.
It's incredibly disorienting.
There is no central focal point to rest your eyes on. It overwhelms the viewer through its sheer, massive scale. It is over 8 feet tall and 17 feet wide, and the raw, undeniable evidence of kinetic motion.
It's huge.
When you stand in front of Autumn Rhythm, you are not reading a text. You are reading body language. A gestural mark on a canvas is the visual equivalent of a shout, a sudden flinch, a prolonged hesitation, or a gentle caress.
A visual equivalent.
A violent, thick slash of black paint implies intense physical force, gravity, and speed. A delicate, pooling, thin drip of silver paint implies suspension, delicate control, and weighting.
Okay,
Let me just finish this thought. Pollock proved decisively that an artwork could communicate deep meaning not by showing a picture of an event that already happened, but by staging the happening itself right in front of you.
the canvas is the record of the event.
The canvas is not a picture. It is the physical record of a human event. And in a modern world that is completely flooded with images explicitly designed for instant, effortless, thoughtless recognition, the modern image flood we discussed earlier, this kind of abstraction provides a vital service.
Resistance.
It forces the viewer into a state of resistance. It demands that you confront sensation over summary. It slows your perception down to a complete halt.
You can't just consume it.
You cannot just glance at autumn rhythm and say, oh, that's a tree, and move on. It restores the profound difficulty, and therefore the profound reward of truly seeing.
I will readily agree that the concept of the canvas as a physical happening, as an arena of kinetic action, carries immense rhetorical power. The physicality of Pollock's method is completely undeniable.
The paint literally tracks his movement through space.
It does. However, the flaw here is jumping from the physical reality of the paint to the assumption that this translates into a universal language of human experience.
Why isn't it universal? Body language is human?
The idea that a violent, gestural drip inherently communicates the exact same existential reality to all observers is a deeply provincial assumption. It is a specific, highly localized Western lens being projected onto the rest of humanity.
You think it's just a Western thing?
Absolutely. A Pollock canvas was heralded by mid-century American critics in New York as the ultimate existential performance of freedom. It was written about as a triumph of the liberated, unrestrained individual asserting their will onto the world.
Which it was.
But that exact same canvas might read entirely differently elsewhere. To a viewer standing completely outside that specific individualistic cultural narrative, bathed in an entirely different set of aesthetic and social values, that exact same arrangement of dripped paint might simply read as opaque, unstructured chaos.
Chaos.
It might read as a total lack of discipline. The aesthetic ideal of the unrestrained, expressive individual imposing their spontaneous will upon a massive canvas is not a biological constant of the human species. It is a cultural preference.
I see your point.
And this fundamental disagreement over Western assumptions naturally leads us into a global stress test of abstraction. If we expand the historical lens beyond the incredibly narrow confines of mid-century New York and Paris, we immediately see that abstraction has always existed globally.
It has.
But it functions through entirely different, culturally specific paradigms. Consider the vast history of traditional Chinese ink painting.
A beautiful tradition.
The artist is not flinging paint in a frenzy of existential freedom. The artist utilizes incredibly sparse, highly disciplined, meticulously practiced brushwork.
It's very controlled.
Few precise, heavily diluted strokes of ink are meant to evoke massive mountain ranges, shifting weather patterns, vast atmospheric distances, and complex internal states of mind. It deliberately avoids descriptive fullness.
It relies on empty space.
It explicitly requires the viewer's culturally trained mind to complete the image, to understand the philosophical weight of the empty space. Or consider Japanese calligraphy.
Yes.
The practitioner condenses complex language, entire histories of physical gesture, years of rigorous spiritual discipline, and strict bodily training into a single, unrepeatable stroke of ink.
Which is profoundly abstract.
It operates heavily on the aesthetic principle of wabi-sabi, which actively values asymmetry, imperfection, and the poignant reality of impermanence over the classical Western ideals of strict symmetry, total completion, and polished finish.
I completely agree.
These Eastern traditions are not simply non-representational in the simplistic way Western critics often use the term. They decisively prove that abstraction can be deeply symbolic, intensely embodied, and highly culturally legible, all at the exact same time.
Yes.
The mark on the paper is not a shout of unrestrained, chaotic, individual freedom.
It is a profound concentration of discipline, breath control, and cultural heritage. The meaning is not universal, it is highly specific.
Well, I actually embrace that global expansion completely because it does not weaken the argument for abstraction. It exponentially strengthens the argument that abstraction is a vital sensory modeling of reality rather than a retreat from it.
How so?
You are perfectly demonstrating that abstraction is deeply embodied. If we want to look outside the Western canon to see exactly how abstraction physicalizes the specific pressures of the modern condition, we must look at the Japanese Gutai movement.
Ah, the Gutai group.
And specifically at the brilliant artist Atsuko Tanaka. Let me pose a question about how art actually functions in the real world.
Go ahead.
How does an artist capture the sheer, overwhelming anxiety, the blistering speed, and the raw electrification of the modern, post-war industrial world without simply painting a representational picture of a factory or a crowded city street or a neon sign?
You're talking about the electric dress.
Yes. How do you make the viewer physically feel the dangerous voltage of a completely new era? In the early 1950s, amidst the rapid modernization of post-nuclear Japan, Tanaka provided the definitive answer with her monumental, terrifying work, Electric Dress.
It is a terrifying piece of art.
Think about the literal physical reality of this object. She didn't paint a picture. She created a massive, wearable structure composed of hundreds of glaringly bright, incandescently painted light bulbs, long fluorescent tubes, and a massive, tangled nervous system of heavy electrical wires.
Wearable. That's the crazy part.
Wearable. The entire apparatus weighed over 100 pounds. It was a staggering, bruising physical burden just to stand inside it. And when she actually wore it during a performance, the piece was plugged directly into the electrical grid.
Literally plugged in.
It pulsed with blinding, chaotic light. It generated an intense, suffocating physical heat, and it emitted a terrifying, audible electrical hum.
Sensory overload.
It produced an absolute, genuine sensory overload for the artist wearing it and for the audience standing nearby, who could literally feel the heat radiating off her body.
That is undeniably powerful.
This work did not simply depict post-war industrial modernity through a neat, safe, representational allegory on a canvas. It made electrification, anxiety, urban spectacle, and the crushing, dangerous weight of new technology physically felt in the room.
You didn't just look at it.
The viewer did not look at the dress, intellectually recognize a story, and nod in understanding. The viewer experienced the blinding light, the fear of electrocution, and the overwhelming heat.
It's physical.
This completely shatters the tired, persistent assumption that abstract art is just a retreat into a quiet, spiritual void or a cowardly escape from the harshness of reality. Tanaka's work is abstraction at its absolute maximum strength.
Maximum strength, yeah.
It is the aggressive, sensory modeling of a rapidly changing, dangerous world. It operates right in the critical zone where the human body, massive cultural trauma, and raw physical perception violently collide.
Look, we are actually in full agreement that the physical bodily encounter with the work is absolutely vital to its meaning.
Oh, good.
Abstraction is obviously not merely a conceptual puzzle to be solved in the mind. It is a physical event that happens in a specific space. But I'm going to take that exact point regarding the physical encounter and use it to introduce the ultimate wild card into this debate.
The wild card?
The wild card is this.
The physical encounter, the specific context, and the institutional setting can completely, fundamentally override the artist's intention and the physical canvas itself.
Override the intention?
Yes. The meaning of an abstract work is so deeply structurally dependent on its setting that the object itself is radically unstable. To demonstrate exactly how this works, we must slow down and examine the baseline historical case for how context strictly dictates meaning.
Which case?
The year is 1958. Mark Rothko, widely considered one of the absolute titans of the abstract expressionist movement, accepts a highly lucrative, incredibly prestigious commission.
The Seagram murals.
He is hired to paint a series of monumental murals for the Four Seasons restaurant, which is located inside the newly constructed Seagram building in New York City. Designed by Mies van der Rohe,
A beautiful building.
it is the absolute epicenter of corporate power and modernist architecture. Rothko spends months isolated in his studio, pouring his entire soul, his depression, and his philosophical weight into these massive, brooding, deeply atmospheric canvases.
They're stunning.
They are characterized by floating, tense rectangles of dark red, deep black, and bruised maroon. He wanted them to feel claustrophobic, tragic, and profound.
He wanted a very specific reaction.
He finally completes the major cycle of paintings. Then he decides to visit the Four Seasons restaurant with his wife to actually see the physical space where his life's work will be permanently installed.
And this is where it turns.
He walks into this temple of elite, mid-century capitalist luxury. He sees the extraordinarily wealthy diners. He hears the clinking of martini glasses. He absorbs the entire atmosphere of casual, opulent, completely unreflective consumption.
It wasn't exactly a chapel.
And Rothko physically recoils. He realizes with absolute sickening horror that his deeply spiritual, heavy, tragic canvases are about to become nothing more than elegant, highly expensive decor for the ruling class to ignore while they eat oysters.
It's a heartbreaking realization for an artist.
So what actually happened? Think about this for a second. He completely refused to hand over the paintings. He angrily returned the massive commission money, and he withdrew the works entirely, breaking the contract.
It was a massive scandal at the time.
Years later, these exact same paintings were dispersed to major museums. Most famously, a series of them were installed in a dedicated, quiet, dimly lit, chapel-like room at the Tate in London.
The Rothko room.
Think about the mechanics of this event. The paintings themselves, the precise chemical composition of the pigment, the specific weights of the brushstrokes, the exact physical dimensions of the canvas, did not change by a single microscopic fraction between the restaurant and the museum.
The physical object was identical.
Yet their meaning fundamentally, structurally changed. In the Four Seasons, surrounded by noise and wealth, they would have been reduced to luxurious, moody wallpaper.
Right.
In the Tate, surrounded by silence and architectural reverence, they are powerful instruments for profound meditation, silence, and grief. The intention, the setting, and the ethical stance of the artist completely altered what the paintings actually were.
The setting became the content.
This definitively proves that abstract art is not primarily a sovereign proposition hanging independently on a wall, radiating universal truth. It is a contingent event. It occurs in the viewer's body over time, and it is deeply, inextricably scaffolded by the architecture and the culture of the room it sits in.
You know, that exact vulnerability to context is actually why human abstraction is going to survive the current technological revolution.
Oh, how does AI fit into this?
That brilliant historical narrative about Rothko brings us directly to the absolute frontier of why this debate matters right now today. The Rothko Seagram mural story is the perfect lens through which to view the existential crisis currently brought about by artificial intelligence and generative imagery.
Because the machine can generate an image?
We have fully entered an era where a synthetic AI system can be prompted to instantly generate a completely flawless mimicry of a Rothko, a Pollock, or a Kandinsky. The machine can perfectly replicate the surface look of abstraction.
It can.
It can calculate the precise color gradients of maroon and black. It can generate the exact mathematical viscosity of simulated enamel drips. It can perfectly balance the geometry of a black square.
So if surface is all that matters, human art is dead?
Exactly. If the meaning of abstract art relies solely on the visual data presented on the two-dimensional surface, as you suggested earlier when critiquing the formalist, then the machine has already won and human abstraction is completely obsolete.
But it hasn't won.
But the Rothko Seagram murals prove exactly why the machine has not won. Because the AI can only generate the flat visual surface, it cannot generate the physical event.
The context.
In this new era, authorship ceases to be merely about who physically held the brush or who mixed the paint. Authorship becomes entirely infrastructural. The live, unreplicable physical experience of the work becomes the absolute final frontier of human distinction.
So provenance.
Yes. What is the physical scale of the object in the room? What is its duration? What is the human provenance of the canvas? Why did a specific human being make the deliberate choice to place this specific object in this specific architectural space,
Under specific lighting.
under this specific lighting, to be encountered by another physical human body walking through a doorway at a specific moment in time? The physical installation, the human history of refusal and intention, and the embodied spatial encounter are no longer secondary metadata that we read on a museum placard.
They are the art?
They are the core substance of the art itself. When synthetic systems master the production of the visual surface, the value of abstract art shifts entirely to its ability to choreograph a physical, spatial, and deeply human encounter that simply cannot be downloaded, generated, or viewed on a backlit screen.
I believe we are approaching a profound convergence here.
I think we are.
We have rigorously stress-tested both extremes of this argument, and both extremes completely collapse under the weight of the historical evidence.
Total skepticism fails.
Total skepticism, the bare case that abstraction is nothing but an empty geopolitical hoax, a meaningless brand propped up by the CIA and wealthy collectors, fails completely.
Because it actually does something to the body.
It fails because, as we clearly saw with the kinetic bodily energy of Pollock and the terrifying heat-generating reality of Tanaka's electric dress, abstraction demonstrably and physically reorganizes human perception. It actively acts upon the nervous system. It forces us to feel the world differently.
But rigid formalism fails too.
But rigid formalism, the bull case that abstraction is a magical, universal language detached from history, dropping pure truth into the minds of anyone who looks at it, fails just as spectacularly.
It ignores the human element.
It fails because we cannot ever detach human perception from our learned cultural schemas, from our political realities, and from the physical architecture of the room itself, exactly as Rothko so painfully discovered when he walked into that restaurant.
That convergence leads us directly to the core realization of this entire inquiry. It leads to the exact moment where the oldest, most tired, most persistent complaint against abstract art completely disintegrates.
My child could do that.
Right. We've all heard someone stand in front of a modern canvas in a museum, scoff, and say, "My child could do that."
It's such a cliche.
That complaint assumes that the entire value of art is rooted strictly in manual representational complexity, the sheer technical ability to draw a horse that looks exactly like a horse. But that complaint totally collapses when we realize that the true significance of abstraction lies in how relation, context, tension, and human intention are carefully organized.
The organization is the art.
Yes, your child might be able to physically drag a brush loaded with red paint across a canvas, but your child cannot orchestrate the deep historical weight, the spatial tension, the philosophical resistance, and the architectural context of a masterwork.
Absolutely not.
The revelation here is profound. In abstraction, form is no longer merely a vehicle for delivering a separate, external narrative content. Form becomes content. The relationship itself is the message.
Exactly. We must leave behind the definition of abstraction as an art of missing pieces. Abstract art is not what remains when representation disappears. It is what appears when relation becomes the subject.
Wonderfully said.
It is the deliberate elevation of the space between things. As we look toward a future where synthetic systems and highly advanced generative algorithms achieve absolute mastery over the visual surface of art, a critical question remains.
What's the question?
Will our ability to read the deep context, the human provenance, and the bodily temporality of a physical work become the only reliable way we can still recognize genuine human expression?
A terrifying and beautiful thought to end on.
This is the Research Desk officially signing off.